Good afternoon. Thank you for participating in today's press conference for NROL-70. I'm Maura Beard, NRO's Chief Spokesperson and Director of the Office of Public Affairs. Thanks for all of those who are with us today and for those who are dialing in. I will introduce our distinguished panel in a moment, but first I would like to thank our partners here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, U.S. Space Force Space Launch Delta 45 and Space Systems Command, and ULA for helping us to pull this together. I'd also like to welcome members of the media, both in person and on the line, joining us today. We have correspondents from approximately 24 outlets. Thank you for being with us today. I would like to review a few points before we begin. Today's engagement is on the record, attributed by name to our panelists. The scope of this briefing includes the NROL-70 mission and the final Delta IV Heavy launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Background information about today's launch can be found in our press kit, available at nro.gov/launch. We have scheduled 45 minutes for today's press call, and each panelist will deliver a few opening remarks before moving to Q&A. A few words about our distinguished panelists. Dr. Scolese was sworn in as Director of the National Reconnaissance Office in 2019. He is the 19th director and the first to be presidentially appointed and Senate confirmed. Dr. Scolese provides direction, guidance, and supervision on matters pertaining to the NRO. He also executes other authorities specifically delegated by the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. Before his time at the NRO, Dr. Scolese had a distinguished career with NASA. Brigadier General Kristin Panzenhagen is a quad-hatted as Program Executive Officer for Assured Access to Space, Commander Space Launch Delta SLD 45, Director of the Eastern Range, and Director of Launch and Range Operations Space Systems Command. She also serves as the Space Force University Partnership Program co-champion for Purdue University. She also leads the safe and secure payload processing and launching of U.S. government and commercial satellites from Cape Canaveral, Florida. As the U.S. Space Force Director of the Eastern Range, she is the final approval authority for all launches, landings, and DoD testing to include Kennedy Space Center satellites and human spaceflight. Mr. Tory Bruno is the president and CEO of ULA, one of the world's leading heavy lift space launch companies. Over his decades-long career, Tory has developed and fielded dozens of advanced systems in rocketry, hypersonics, directed energy, and space. He has a deep background in national security with a focus on space launch, nuclear deterrence, and missile defense. Tory is a recipient of the von Karman Medal and Lecture in Astronautics, the von Braun Award, and the General John Allison Award. He is an honored fellow of the AIAA and the He is an honored fellow of the AIAA, a member of the National Academy of Engineers, a companion of the Naval Order, and commander of the SMOTJ Order of Merit. He holds patents in rocket technology and is the author of books on medieval history. Tory maintains an active social media presence where he is a tireless advocate for space and always available as everyone's personal rocket scientist. Each of our panelists will now take a moment to share a few opening remarks. I'll begin with NRO's Director, Dr. Kristin Scolese.
Well, welcome everybody. It's certainly great to be here with two colleagues, General Panzenhagen, a great friend. We worked together at the NRO, and of course Tory I've worked with for a long, long time. He's launched many of our satellites, so it's great to be here. This is a particularly important mission. You know, all of our missions are really important, and this one ranks up there, but it's a little bit more special because it is going to be the last flight of the Delta IV Heavy, and I think of the Delta IV period. So we're very much, looking forward to it. As with all of our missions, they're focused on national security and delivering the best information we believe in the world for our policymakers, our analysts, the warfighter, and the civil community as needed. So we're all looking forward to the launch tomorrow. weather permitting. I had an interesting bumpy ride in this morning. Well, actually I should say this afternoon. It was supposed to be this morning. So hopefully it clears up and we have good weather for tomorrow.
General Panzenhagen, please.
Thanks. Well, welcome everybody. Fantastic that you are able to join us here at the Cape for today's event and then hopefully also for the launch itself. Just from a personal standpoint, very exciting for me to be here. I was a young captain when we launched the first couple Delta IV Heavies out of here, so to see that kind of come full circle is a really special moment in my career. From a Space Force standpoint, you know, our mission is securing our nation's interest in, from, and to space. So this is a very visible example of the to space part of that, but it's also a very visible example of the partnership that it takes to do this. You know, the interagency partnership between NRO and the Space Force, but then also we wouldn't be able to do this without our industry partners as well. So honored to be working with these two gentlemen and both of their agencies and looking forward to getting that capability on orbit.
Thank you. It is an honor to be up here with both of you. Amazing partners. Bittersweet moment for us. You know, this is such an amazing piece of technology, you know, 23 stories tall and 500,000 gallons of propellant, 2.25 million pounds of thrust, and the most metal of all rockets, setting itself on fire before it goes to space. So retiring it is obviously the future, moving to Vulcan, a less expensive, higher performance rocket, but still sad. You know, it is an honor for us to serve these missions. You know, we have done 3/4, I think, of the missions for NRO, and we're humbled by that trust. And of course, this really is, in a way, your rocket. This will be the 16th flight. All but 4 of those have been for the NRO because of its unique capabilities. And so we are looking for a successful mission and a great retirement of an amazing vehicle. Thank you for your trust, and thank you both for your partnership. We could not do this, obviously, without our customer, but especially without you, General. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your introductions. Due to the large number of media we have today, we will call on you by media outlet in random order, alternating between those in the room and those on the phone. Feel free to pass if you do not have a question, and we'll do our best to get as many of you as we can in the time allotted. Most importantly, for those on the line, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Now we'll begin our Q&A session. I would like to start with Bill Harwood from CBS News.
Well, actually, I don't have a question quite yet, but I'll ask one anyway. Tory, it is quite a moment to see the 16th Delta IV Heavy go off here. We were talking earlier about when you tried to launch the first one, you had all those software modules that had glitches, you had to work all those bugs out.
Yeah.
Just talk a little bit more about the significance to ULA that the programs had, but then looking forward to Vulcan and the transition just a little bit. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and this is a great mission to sort of think about that transition because the National Security Space mission is our core, and the unique set of missions there require this high energy rocket capability, very special orbits. And we designed Vulcan specifically for that. That's its optimum. Every rocket can do a range of missions, but there's one mission it's best at. It is literally designed to be best at the mission we're going to fly here with this last Delta IV. So that's part of why it's so important to us. It collapses the price of that particular mission. The Delta IV is 3 rockets bolted together. I mean, that's basically what it is. And with a single core Vulcan, we're able to collapse that cost by, you know, like 70% and make that mission a lot more practical and able to fly also at a much higher tempo, which is going to be pretty important as the country faces into the threat from Russia and especially China.
All right, thank you. Next, I'd like to go to the New York Times, Kenneth Chang. Kenneth, are you there?
Hi, can you?
Yep, we hear you. Kenneth, are you there? We can come back to you. All right, why don't we move along and we'll come back to Kenneth. Next, Chris Davenport, or I apologize, Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal. Micah, are you there?
Hey, can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Sure can. Thanks, Micah.
Okay, great. Hey, Tory, obviously the final flight for Delta IV Heavy has been coming for a while now, but now that you're on the cusp of this really being official for this vehicle, could you just talk a little bit more about Vulcan and specifically the production ramp for Vulcan? How's that going, and how are things looking for the second flight? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, it starts with, have you got a good design? And Cert 1 went, you know, just recently. It was a perfect flight. I'm not actually used to that, even with our approach where we try and get the rocket as close to perfect as we can in the first mission. Usually you have, a set of anomalies or observations, and you have to work through 6 months to a year of sort of resolving that and making minor changes. This was dead nominal throughout, perfect insertion, bullseye. You know, we had no anomalies, what we would refer to as one observation, where we kind of missed just a little bit on the thermal modeling of the aero loads on the first stage fuel tank. And so our 302.5 second burn finished at 301 seconds. I'll probably insulate the tank. So what that means to us on the ramp up, which is what you asked about, is that we don't have to go through that iteration. So all of the hardware that I'm building right now in my supply chain and in the factory, where I've got 4 or 5 boosters in flow, literally 4 of them done, engines about to be put on them, are good to go. So that helps us come up that ramp rate. When we get out to about mid to back half of 2025 or next year, we will be looking to hit a launch tempo of every 2 weeks, or 25 a year. That's quadrupling what we do now. And so we are literally building ahead so we can build up inventory and then come on into that as the infrastructure comes online. Here at the Cape, the most important and visible thing you'll see is a whole nother vertical integration facility and line that feeds the pad. You only spend a day or 2 on the pad. The bottleneck is integrating the rocket in the VIFs. And so now there'll be 2 lanes, so that we're building 2 rockets all the time simultaneously and shooting them down to the pad. So we're feeling pretty good about the ramp up. Big challenge. I'm not going to BS you. It will be tight through 24 and into 25, at least the first half. But we're on track, and we're pretty confident we're going to hit that tempo when we mean to, you know, late next year.
Great, thank you. Next, I'd like to go to CNBC's Michael Sheets.
Appreciate it. Dr. Scolese, so given the this is the last Delta IV Heavy mission, and heavy lift rocket of this size lifting an unspecified payload seems to be the new paradigm where you're no longer going solely to those sort of heavy lift rockets, and this sort of marks a shift in the NRO's acquisition strategy, similar to what SDA has been doing with PWSA. But I was wondering if you could talk to me about how the NRO is trying to maybe diversify its reconnaissance spacecraft, and not just these larger spacecraft that fly on heavy lift rockets, but also, you know, with the recent reporting around Starshield and the contracts that have been signed there around smaller satellites that fly along, you know, as ride shares effectively on Starlink missions. Talk to me a little bit about how that, you know, the acquisition strategy has shifted at the NRO.
Sure. We actually started about 5 years ago launching some prototypes, moving down in this path, because we realized that we needed a proliferated architecture, and we also needed the larger systems as well in order to meet our full mission. But I'll focus a little bit more on the proliferated architecture. We recognized that we had challenges, as we mentioned, with Russia and China trying to deny our ability to operate space. So that was one reason. The other reason we needed it is we recognized that we needed to more persistent coverage of the Earth. So there's an open mic somewhere.
Yeah, excuse me. There's an open mic. If you could please mute.
So we needed to proliferate. Now that required us to really go off. If you're going to proliferate, you need to be able to get it down to a price point that is workable. So we started working with the industry, as I said, about 5, maybe 6, 7 years ago, to go off and do that. And we now have, a series or a few companies that are actually building, production spacecraft. So we've taken advantage of that, and we've partnered and gone out and worked with them to have the base for our proliferated architectures as we go forward. That also means working with the payload providers so that we have a more manufacturable, cost-effective payload that still delivers the mission. We've been doing all of that, and we're now in the process of actually deploying those capabilities as we speak, and we need to go off and of course do more. We have more launches coming up and more development coming up as we go along. And just to reiterate, that doesn't mean that we're not going to be launching systems like we'll be launching tomorrow. We still need those capabilities in order to overall accomplish our mission. But you're correct. We are proliferating, and we're expanding our vendor base to take advantage of those more mass-produced spacecraft.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask one more time. I think there is still an open mic, so please check your phones, please. Next, I'm turning to Aviation Week. Here in the room, Irene Klotz.
Thanks very much. I have 2 questions. The first for General Panzenhagen. Can you run through the schedule for what is going to be happening with Space Launch Complex 37 after this flight? And for Tory, based on the results of CERT-1, are there additional flight demonstrations that you plan to do on CERT-2 for NSSL? Thanks.
Sure. So for Slick 37, immediately following the flight, the lease is still with ULA, so they still have things there. But we have entered the environmental impact statement process. So SAF-IE is leading that from the Pentagon. Nominally, that's about a 2-year process, so we won't make any decisions on the future of Slick 37 until we understand what any potential environmental impacts would be.
Safe, secure, and clean. We'll render it in that condition and return it to the Space Force to be used by whoever else needs it. I'm sorry, your question was about additional? Yeah.
Or ahead of NSSL.
Yeah. So I think you asked, will there be additional things done that were not done on CERT-1? Yes, as long as the rocket is flying and its payload is delivered and we still have performance, which we will for our primary payload, Dream Chaser, just like on CERT-1, we'll conduct additional maneuvers and sort of trajectory exploration and collect data so that we really better understand the health of the rocket going forward as early as possible. But that's the plan. So when our payload comes to us from its testing now, it's in thermal vac testing out at the NASA facility. I was just with the Sierra Space folks yesterday, and all is going well, they tell me, so we're pretty excited about that. When it's done, it'll come here and do some preparations that it requires, that things that you can't do before you ship it that we always do here. For example, not to say this is what they're doing, but for example, I can't ship my boosters here with ordnance installed. So they come here and there's a limited amount of processing. They have other tasks they'll do. Then we'll get it ready and integrate it on the vehicle, and as soon as they're here and they're ready, we'll fly them.
Great, thank you. I'm going to pause just for a moment and see if we have Kenneth Chang back on the phone from the New York Times. Okay, moving ahead, I'd like to turn to
Can you hear me?
Oh yes, Kenneth, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, sorry. That's great. I had a Delta IV 101 question. The most visually striking part of the launch is the
it's setting itself on fire. So I was wondering, what is the reason for the hydrogen, and what was the rationale for that design?
Yeah, so it is a LOX hydrogen first stage, which is a little bit unusual. We like those propellants because they're very, very high performance. And in order to prepare the RS-68 engines to get that very cold cryogenic propellant flowing through them, before they're ignited, we start flowing that propellant. And hydrogen is lighter than air, and so after it flows through the engine into the flame trench, it then rises. And when the engines are finally cool and ready to go and we start spinning up the pumps, then we actually drop the main load and we ignite it, and that flame carries on up that sort of plume, if you will, of hydrogen, which is clinging to the side of the booster and rising up. It is one of the reasons there's SOFI insulation, that striking orange insulation on the boosters. Part of that's, of course, for aero heating, but the thickness of it is to account for that effect. And so we get our nice toasted marshmallow boosters and the very dramatic effect of you know, self-emulating the booster, and then away she goes.
All right, thank you, sir. Turning to the phone, C4ISR Net, Courtney Albin, are you on the line?
Hi.
Hi, Courtney. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, sorry about that. I had a muting issue. I apologize if this was already mentioned. I had to cut out for a few minutes, but I was wondering, Dr. Scolese, if there's anything you can say regarding the mission or the capabilities that we'll be launching tomorrow.
Well, there really isn't much that I can say other than it's, you know, it's a national security payload that's going to provide, you know, exquisite capability that is needed by a lot of people and organizations. You know, clearly the policymakers, the warfighter, and others, so that they can know what's going on the Earth.
And is this a capability that was developed in partnership with the Space Force, or rather just by the NRO, you know, that will benefit the military?
Well, almost everything we do is with the Space Force because, you know, our organization is composed of a number of different, what we call parent elements. And the largest on the military side is the Space Force. And of course, going back in history, it was the Air Force. So almost everything we do, in fact, everything we do with the Space Force.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, I'm going to turn on the line to Orlando Sentinel, Richard Tribou.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Awesome. This question is really for Tory. What facets of the Delta side of ULA has really fed into Vulcan, and what of those parts, which ones have been the most successful toward Vulcan's success in January and future?
Yeah,
that's it. Thank you.
That's a great question, because when you develop a new rocket, you know, I think my personal design philosophy, which I've, you know, learned over many rocket developments, is you want to bring forward heritage elements that are reliable and you understand very well, and focus your new technology on things that will make a big difference in the performance of the rocket itself. And so Delta is brought forward technology and architectural elements from both Atlas, I said Delta, Vulcan, and Delta. And so when we look at the Vulcan, we see a 5.4 meter diameter rocket, and throughout its length, which we bring that scale over from the Delta IV platform, and especially the Delta IV Heavy. We have the modular rocket design with the solids that were both present on Delta IV Medium, but especially on Atlas, so that's an Atlas heritage element. When we started developing Vulcan, I had just begun refreshing the avionics for Atlas and Delta, and to be more producible and more affordable at that time, it was going to be a common avionics suite. But we were able to catch it in time and make it common between Atlas, Delta, and Vulcan. with a simplified box count, that sort of thing, more modern technology, more commercial electronic piece parts. So it's really a blending, as you say. There are new elements to that, the massive high energy upper stage and now in the Centaur 5 versus the Centaur 3. That is a new architectural element. And when we put all that together, when you develop the pieces of the rocket that are part of that integrated system that you designed to be a system, they don't all get done at the same point in time. And so one of our design strategies was to fly Vulcan before we flew it. So when the avionics got done, they started flying on the other rockets as they ran out of their heritage avionics suite. When we got the payload fairing done, we started flying that on Atlas. The SRBs are bigger for Vulcan, but only in that they're longer. They're about 5 feet longer. So when we developed those SRBs, we also developed a shorter version that was compatible with Atlas. So those have been flying for a while. So, you know, while we're very proud of that perfect first mission on Vulcan, in all honesty, I have to confess to you that we had flown a lot of pieces of that rocket many times before we actually put them all together and flew them on a Vulcan. So, you know, I'm sorry for that being complicated, but it really is like that. We took the best of one rocket, the best of the other rocket, combined them, added some new technology where it made a big difference in the performance or affordability of Vulcan, and that's what you saw go up, you know, back in January.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to turn to Florida today. I have both Rick Neal and Brooke Edwards on the phone. If one of you would like to ask a question.
Hi, this is Brooke. I would say, what is the most significant thing that you're looking for on this last flight?
And who would you like to direct that question to?
Well, I'll take a first shot.
Sir, do you want to take a shot?
Mission success. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Me too. I want a nice, clean mission. I'm knocking on wood right here. I'll confide in all of you that this is a launch luck mustache. It was grown out first for Vulcan. It was retained for your mission, sir. And about 30 seconds after our mission success, it's gone.
Well, we appreciate your sacrifice.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now I'd like
to... thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to turn back into the room to Spectrum News 13. Greg Pallone and John, one of you would like to ask a question?
Tori, what type of razor do you use?
I use a Gillette razor.
Gillette. The name has been dropped. This actually is for the general. Tori had mentioned ramping up launches. How is your team preparing for that cadence? Because we're already seeing a lot. We're going to see a lot more. How is your team preparing for that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It's something we've been focusing on for a while now, knowing, you know, we know years out that the launch cadence is going to continue to ramp up both on the NSSL and the commercial side. So we've been doing a lot of things. Where it makes sense, we've been looking at automation. What processes can we streamline and where can we add automation to free up some of the manpower? We have really scrutinized how we do scheduling and make sure we're scheduling things smartly in the most streamlined way. We are also recognizing that we are in a different era now than we were 10, 20 years ago. So some of the things that made sense for us back then, now that we have, in certain instances, rocket fleets that are, you know, a lot more experienced than others, you know, looking at how we can shape acquisition and mission assurance to make sure we're expending resources where they will be the most productive and not just because that's how we've always done it. So whether you're talking the acquisition side of the house or the operational side of the house, that's something that we have been digging deep into and have been making changes actively over the last year plus.
Yeah, I think I would add that I feel that General Panzenhagen and her team have been excellent partners in supporting not just our company, but everyone who's coming to the range. New launchers with higher cadence. You know, they really are a wonderful partner here.
Thank you.
Also here in the room, I'd like to turn to Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Yes, hi. Question for Dr. Scolese, following up on an earlier question about the choice of this rocket for this mission. I know you're limited on what you can say in response to this, but was there a discussion at some point about waiting for Vulcan, since Tory mentioned that it's about 70% cheaper to fly a mission like this on that rocket, or was there a time critical element to get this mission on orbit and it made sense to go with the Delta and give it its swan song? Thank you.
Yeah, as Tory said, it takes a lot of planning in order to launch a rocket. It takes a lot of planning in order to put a payload on a rocket, and so we needed time to do it, and we had the spacecraft ready to go, and we had a rocket that we trust, so it made sense to continue on with this. Something has to be last. And we're proud to be, that vehicle, and we have a lot of confidence in the system. That's the rocket, ULA, the Space Force, the Cape, everybody that's involved in it. So it just made sense to go at this time.
All right, turning back to the phone, Stephen Clark with Ars Technica. Stephen, are you still there? All right, I will move on and come back. NASA spaceflight, Max Evans and Derek Wise here in the room.
This question's for you, Tory. Are there any Delta-related launch traditions that will carry on from Delta over into Atlas throughout its life and now Vulcan in the long term?
Yeah. By launch traditions, I'm thinking of the various superstitions that we have in our launch team. Rocketry being probably the most technologically sophisticated of things that we do, it is more superstitious than baseball. Apart from the mustache, I am not authorized to disclose to you other things that my employees may or may not do. But yes, they will continue.
Indeed they will.
All right, next, Teresa Cross here in the room with Space Explored.
Hi, this question is for Tory. What legacy do you hope or believe that Delta IV will leave behind in the space community? And is there anything extraordinary associated with preparing Delta IV for its final flight? Thank you.
Yeah, the legacy we hope for Delta is one of service. This really is your rocket. It has done great service for our nation. Its other missions have done tremendous service for exploration and science. That's how I want Delta to be remembered. It's why we do the work we do. Even our commercial work that is now half of our business or half of our manifest, in a large extent serves the national interest and our national policy, both domestically and overseas. That's how we think about it.
And I'll just add from NRO, we did do a 3-poster series honoring and tributing our final 3 flights on the Delta IV Heavy. Those posters can be downloaded from NRO.gov if anyone is interested in a piece of tribute related to the last flight. All right, next we have Space Scout, Derek.
Hi, this is for General Panzenhagen. You mentioned earlier that you were captain during the early phases of the Delta program, and now, of course, you're the commander of SLD-45. What's it like going into this last mission and just knowing that you've been a part of it for so long?
It's awesome. I think anybody that is assigned from the military standpoint to work launch, you always want to come back. Once you see what these rockets are doing and really appreciate the capabilities that we're putting on orbit, you always want to come back. So I honestly can't believe how lucky I am to be here. And if there was a time to come back to launch, this is it. When we look at what we're trying to do with great power competition, everything we do is so impactful right now that this is just a dream come true to be here leading this organization, working with these mission partners.
All right, thank you. I'd like to turn back to the phone with Hometown News and Chris Bonanno.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you so much. This is for Tory. I know you all touched early in the call about sort of the different feel of this launch. I'm wondering, is this something you've been anticipating? Has it been circled on the calendar, so to speak? And then second, kind of wondering, is there a buzz in the community that you can feel potentially as well?
Well, yes, we have been counting the days to this final launch. It is the last rocket. We don't have an extra Delta IV Heavy to put in a museum, so we've been really very, very careful. We have on a rocket like this what we call golden eggs. You know, there are spares, but not everything has a spare. We have exercised extreme care, I think, you know, our team and our partners in making sure that we're able to launch on time and that we're able to have a successful mission. So yeah, it absolutely has a special feel to it. And we're very excited, you know, to come in with Vulcan and fly these missions on a new platform. But at the same time, we love this rocket. You know, Delta's been around in one form or another for 60 years. It was the Thor IRBM, then it was the Delta Space Launch Vehicle. It went through Delta 1, 2, 3 into 4. There were many models of Delta rockets before that. You know, in the Delta 2 and Delta 3 era, it had different configurations. It just has a storied legacy in our community. And it has done great things for our nation. We're very proud to have been a part of that. And even though Vulcan is the future, I'm personally sad to see it go.
Yeah, I think we all will be when you think the Delta throughout its history has put satellites in orbit around the Earth, on the surface of Mars, and on interplanetary journeys. I mean, it's done everything.
All right, thank you. I'd like to turn now on the phone with the AFP. Lucy Alberg, are you online? AFP, are you there? Okay, I'm going to move on to our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Don.
Hello, hi, thanks for doing this. I have a question for Tory. Tory, do you have a favorite Delta IV Heavy launch, and if so, why?
You know, I get asked questions like that all the time, and I always say, I love all my children. But since we're here at the last launch, I'm going to admit, and I'm really sorry, Chris, but it's Parker Solar Probe. And not just because it was a cool mission where we were going to send a probe literally flying through the atmosphere of the sun, currently the fastest human object in the universe, but also because we could have Dr. Parker there with us, 90 years old, a rebel scientist who first said, space is not empty, it's full of solar wind and things like that, and they told him he was crazy, and he stuck to his guns, and eventually we had the honor of flying the culmination of his life's work. So up until this launch, that one is my favorite.
Thank you.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left. We did have a few folks not on the line. I just wanted to make sure there weren't any final folks who joined before I took another look at our list here. Okay, I'm going to go back to a couple. I don't have time to do the whole list in complete order for the second go-round, but I will pick a few in the event there are any additional questions. Bill, why don't we go ahead and start with you since you're at the top of the lineup.
Another Tory question. You mentioned Cert 1 and what a good flight that was. Could you talk a little bit about the BE-4 and the performance of that, and, well, I'm sorry, the performance of the BE-4 and the supply chain, the stockpile, as you ramp up the Vulcan?
Yeah, sure. So first off, really happy with the performance of the BE-4. You know, it is, you know, the largest scale, you know, methane engine, certainly in this engine cycle put together. So there was a lot of technical risk getting there, and there were challenges that paced the completion of that development. Those were all overcome. We had a perfect mission out of the BE-4. Our partners at Blue Origin, I don't mind telling you, and we shut down 1.2 seconds early. We're afraid it was their fault. It absolutely was not. It was because of that thermal modeling issue I talked about The last little slug of methane going through and feeding into the engine was warmer and just took the engine out of its run box. That's why we shut down earlier. The engine performed flawlessly. The ISP, the performance of the engine, was higher than predicted. And confident enough now that we cash that in. You've been at this a long time. You know how we kind of play the engineering with this stuff. We hold back and don't count on the performance or even necessarily the weight savings we actually have until we're sure we can do it over and over. We'd seen it on the ground. We wanted to see it in the air, which we did. So very, very happy with the engine. Definitely worth the wait. In terms of the stockpile, yeah, in the supply chain, I will absolutely talk to that. You know, we have invested a lot of money in the infrastructure here at the pad, at our factory, and in our suppliers to be able to come up to this launch rate. And I'll give you a scoop. The launch site is being sized to do 25 plus missions a year. So, you know, maybe getting a little closer to 30. The current supply chain and factory were sized to do 19 builds a year. And so that meant we started building early and building up literally a stockpile or an inventory that would then burn down. That gives us more time to bring that side of the infrastructure up to that higher rate so that we didn't have to get both of them going at 25, 30 a year. The pacing item in our supply chain is BE4. Everyone else is on track or early to the plan. Our solid rocket motors were feeling pressure for a little while for two reasons. One being we got a lot more of the missions that required a full set of solid rocket boosters than we expected, so we needed more. And also because the big expansion of casting capability in Utah required a lot of construction and, you know, excavation for giant casting pits. These are the longest single segment solid rocket motors ever produced. And so you dig a very deep hole in the ground to cast them in, and we hit granite, we hit bedrock, and so we were using a lot of dynamite for a while. And we're a little bit concerned, but about a week and a half ago we came through that. And so now we're back on track, back on schedule. So that leaves us with the BE4. And the reason the BE4 is a little bit behind everybody else is because it took a little longer to get it developed and finished, and it is now. We have wonderful facilities in the BE4 factory in Huntsville that Blue Origin has built and expanded, literally doubled their factory size to do this. So they have to catch up now to everybody else building ahead. It'll be, I think it's going to be you know, adequate to need and support our manifest, but we're not really going to be on the build-ahead plan this year in the front part of next year with Blue Origin until they then really hit their stride and they hit their production rate we're looking for, and then they'll catch back up and they'll build up an inventory like everybody else. That's the state of affairs today. That's why I can say with confidence that we'll make our manifest, and we're just going to need a little bit more time to get them built up.
All right, I have time for one more final question on the line. I'm going to ask one more time if Micah Maidenberg from the Wall Street Journal has a question.
Hey, thank you. I'll pass it off to somebody else. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Micah. How about one last question in the room?
Thanks for whoever might have this information. Are you able to give us the launch window and the scrub turnarounds if it goes through the weekend or over to Monday if you need it, and the latest on the weather? Thanks.
We're all everybody's.
Yes, you got the weather. I know what the window is, but go ahead.
For the weather, so we do have, which you all are probably feeling right now, a front that's going to be coming through. So as of this morning, we are looking at about probably a 70% chance of violation of weather because of clouds and winds. So still 30% chance that it would be good. But we do know we are expecting the weather to clear up as we go through Friday and the weekend.
So are there launch opportunities over the weekend as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have sequential days, yeah. 2 more backup days, and it as the general said, it gets better tomorrow. and the forecast, I think, is even better the day after that.
I mean, it gets better on Friday.
It gets better on Friday. And
Gets
then
better on Friday.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Better on Friday
I'm
and
jumping
better
the gun.
then
I'm
even
so
better on
anxious to
Saturday.
get it off.
It opens at what, 1:40,
1:40.
and it's about a 4-hour window.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that big long window helps us a lot.
Yeah.
You understand, I think, that what we don't like about clouds in this kind of cover is the potential for lightning. Rockets get struck by lightning often. There's a lot of surface area on a rocket, so it's not necessarily a failure, but there's no reason to ask for that chance to happen. And so we follow the lead of our partner here, and when they say there's an unacceptable potential for that, then we wait and for a better day. Wind is another obvious thing. Wind's at ground level at the pad, especially on a Delta IV, which is a 3-core rocket. Lots of surface area. The concern is being blown back towards the launch tower. And so we have a very well understood criteria. It depends on the angle of the wind. And we know what to do. We can launch through a pretty narrow moment in time. So if the winds calm down even for just a few minutes so that we're confident that that's where they're going to be, then we'll launch through that opportunity.
All right, thank you. This concludes our session today. I want to thank everyone for being here, and go NROL-70. Thank you.